Hello, my name is Julia Streets and welcome to the podcast series StreetsTalksTo. In each episode, I'll be interviewing CEOs from some of the most influential firms, bodies and initiatives in the financial services industry. And as every CEO will testify, one of the critical factors of success lies in the strength of the team. So on each episode, we invite the CEO to bring along a colleague, and together we'll be looking at what's at the very forefront of innovation and change. We'll be thinking about the challenges facing their clients and the industry at large, and uncovering the opportunities that exist both today and as we look ahead, particularly as we all navigate these extraordinary times. I hope you enjoy the series, which you can find on all good podcast channels, and all the episodes are listed on our website, streetsconsulting.com. Thank you for listening. Welcome to StreetsTalksTo OpenFin, and today I'm delighted to be joined by the European CEO Adam Toms and his colleague CTO Tim Dinsdale. And before I introduce our guests, let me tell you a bit about OpenFin. In a nutshell, OpenFin brings the application interoperability we have all come to love and enjoy on our mobile devices onto the financial desktop. You could say that OpenFin is doing to the financial desktop what Apple and Android have done for mobile. OpenFin's widely adopted desktop operating system enables financial services firms to build new applications with modern web technology, all the while enabling seamless and secure integration with legacy applications. And I say widely because today OpenFin is used to deploy over 1,200 applications across more than 225,000 desktops at 1,500 institutions in more than 60 countries. And so, to introduce our guests. As I mentioned, Adam Toms is the European CEO of OpenFin. He joined in 2017 to lead the expansion strategy across Europe and to work with clients globally on their digital initiatives. Now, during his career, Adam has managed numerous high-profile businesses and led several large-scale integration and transformation projects, and has quite a reputation for delivering industry change. Because before joining OpenFin, Adam was CEO of Internet Europe and held other tenures, which have included joint global head of electronic trading at Nomura and a trading career at Barclays Global Investors, specialising in index and quantitative trading. Tim Dinsdale is the European CTO of OpenFin. He's responsible for leading the firm's technology efforts right the way across the region, expanding OpenFin's London-based development team, and driving their desktop services initiatives globally. He joined the firm in 2019 from a position as managing director in the technology division at Goldman Sachs, where he had worked for some 15 years. He's an avid supporter of diversity in the workplace, spearheading the collaboration with We Are the City, actively involved in conferences and awards, and is developing programs for returnships for women into the workplace. Adam and Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for inviting us on, Julia.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks very much for having me.
Now, as we always start on StreetsTalksTo and it's StreetsTalksTo OpenFin, we don't start with you. We start with your customers, the industry at large. I'm really keen to hear, what is it at the moment that's particularly keeping your customers awake at night? Adam, come to you first of all.
Our clients are really focused on making the most of all the exciting technologies that are available out there in the marketplace today. I think, we all know we've seen an extreme kind of explosion in kind of fintech solutions being offered, and of course, lots of new modern technology tooling that's become available, be it machine learning, AI, RPA, and many other technologies. That can lead to a bit of an overload of applications and data and insights onto people's desktops, particularly for users sitting at desktops each day. And so the question is how do we get the most from these tools? I think every organization really wants to be, their employees, no matter their role, wants them to be as productive as possible. And from a customer perspective, you want to be able to differentiate yourself. So I think they're two main priorities. Now, obviously, we largely operate in financial services, and the other super important element to that is making sure that firms operate in a compliant manner and that they really tackle operational risk. So it's really about how we make the most of everything that's available today and deliver it to users in a really insightful way.
And it's incredibly important, isn't it? Because at the moment, the complexity challenge has become even greater. So not only are people thinking about what are all the various applications that I could be tapping into, what do I need if I'm going through a period of change, and actually how do I get them all to talk to each other on a fundamental basis. But that behind the scenes of that, Tim, is a huge technical challenge that's designed to look incredibly simple. Talk to us about what you're talking to clients about at the moment.
Right. So it's funny that you should talk about, the proliferation of apps, of course, because you're going from one world where the number of applications on the financial desktop is increasing massively to another world where everybody's at home with smaller monitors, desperately trying to struggle with this volume of information and volume of communication that's just going on with them. Now, we're seeing a couple of things. So the first thing is that workflows are still being run through Outlook. We're seeing that traders are at home. They're having to deal with the issues that you would expect that you'd have to do when you're on a major trading floor, where your calls are being recorded. But of course, this is now all being done through home systems, and we're seeing how compliance are having to get comfortable with running half of their trading floor, half of their sales force from home. We know that some people are still going into the banks, but it's a much, much, much reduced volume of people because they're having to instigate social distancing. Then the other thing, as Adam is mentioning, is we've got all of these apps, all of these things all talking to each other that we're trying to move to a world where they're all working nicely, because you see these workflows on the financial desktop, which is still, I've got an email, I copy and paste this bit of text, I figure out what's going in here, I paste it into this next application, I type some things in, it pops up a dialogue, I copy that dialogue, paste it into this next thing, right? It's hard when you've got 12 screens. It is a nightmare when you've got one, when you're running out of your iPod and a Dell, plug next to it. I said iPod, nobody uses iPods anymore, do they? I'm showing my age. And iPads.
But you're right, because actually
Sorry.
the amount of desk real estate has shrunk, but actually the screen size in many cases has shrunk as well, and the ability as human beings to be able to do that. And that's probably quite an interesting moment to think about, because a lot of people look at the conversation around application systems and operating systems through a technology point of view. But of course, we're talking about human beings who are now going to start returning into offices. And I'm really keen to think about, what has changed most recently and what are people thinking about as they come back into organizations? Adam, let me come to you first on that.
Yeah, so I think fundamentally the assumptions about the workplace are being deeply challenged. We know that there was almost a stigma attached, perhaps, in some organisations about working from home, and that is changed. There was also lots of planning around use of DR sites and BCP. For extreme scenarios, it turns out that nobody planned particularly well for whole companies working from home. But what's super interesting is that companies have coped. In the short term, they really focus on making sure systems were as stable and as accessible as possible. But unfortunately, many firms are still using lots of legacy technology, which means there's a really strong reliance on virtual desktop environments, which can be a little bit slow and challenged in some ways. Now, one of the changes we have been seeing in the industry more broadly, and certainly OpenFin has been benefiting from this, is this move to web technology over time. And I really think we're going to see a significant acceleration in the use of web technology propelled by everybody's kind of remote working experience. And the other, I think Tim made a super interesting point earlier. It's less about, when we talk about physical workspace, it can manifest itself in many different ways. We think about it as being the office. Also think about it as being those 6 or 8 monitors that many people in financial services sit in front of. And as Tim said, now going down to that 1 or 2 monitors. So it's going to be less about, the physical number of screens and having all of your applications and lots of redundant information around you, and really thinking about what is the new digital workspace actually look like. I only need to see the most relevant data and insights at a certain moment in time. I need to interact with the applications. They need to appear in my workflow with the right context. And I really think there's going to be significant acceleration of people's digital initiatives as they think about people working in offices to home in a much more interchangeable manner than we've seen before.
And at the heart of all of this lies the ability to be confident. As we're going into arguably sort of hybrid working models, is the confidence that whether you're physically in an office real estate space or you're at home, and we're all talking to each other in lockdown right now, is that actually all your data is interoperable and everything's running seamlessly. So it is literally a switch on. But that's not easy to achieve, Tim. I mean, what do clients mostly thinking about with that?
Right. So they have to figure out the ability to deliver actionable information to all of the people who are working on all of the systems in a way that doesn't involve, a 30 people meeting in a meeting room, right? That's gone now. So now it's like, the very, very most basic part of that obviously has been the getting all the financial services happy with running all of their businesses through Zoom and WebEx and Skype. Nobody's really talking about Skype, are they? And as a result, that's been the first thing, right? Now, I think the second then big stage is saying, okay, great. Instead of just this workflow where the standard operating procedure is everybody gets on the phone and we all, try and figure it out. What's the next thing now? How do you now start packaging up information, workflow things that you can give to people so that they can then start picking that up and running with it without needing to do that, so that you can then start, like boxing your people up even more efficiently, so that they're no longer each other's bottlenecks. The communication, that kind of, because obviously it's nice to talk to people, right? And that's never going to go away. You're always going to get like groups of people sat at the end of the day with a beer on a Zoom, saying, well, that went well, that went badly. But ideally you want to be in a world where that's not the bottleneck, right? The bottleneck instead is the fact that computers are running absolutely white hot because they're running all of your calculations for you, because that then you can upgrade those. So I really do believe that this is the beginning of a huge mental model shift in terms of how people work in finance.
So at the heart of all of this is the confidence that whether you're in an office or whether you're working at home, that when you switch on a desktop, how in whatever form or location, that you have the confidence that everything is 100% interoperable. But how do you achieve that?
Sure. I mean, it's incredibly hard, but the tools are coming together now. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to build the technical backbone, right? You have to have all of these applications need to be able to plug into a completely standardized mechanism that everybody has all agreed this is the way that we're going to talk to each other on a technical level. Now, of course, we've been working really hard on the FTC3 solution that we have as part of OpenFin, which is it's that technical backbone. It's the ability to say, okay, fine, I know how I'm going to register myself as part of the local mesh, and I know how I'm going to get the the data that's going to come through the the local pipes. Then the next thing then is you then have to get the consensus from the application builders. What you have to do is you have to be able to say, okay, fine, I'm really interested in receiving this particular type of data, and so then all of these industry participants have to be able to get through it together, and they have to be able to say, okay, right, this is what it looks like when you send a ticker over. I'm going to send this and you're going to receive this, and everybody all agrees this is the shape of it, right? So that's the stage we're at now where we've got all of these industry participants who are part of the FTC3 consortium who are all agreeing on some, at the moment, basic but still very fundamental data parts they can send to each other. Okay, then the next thing you then have to go and do, which is the place that we're really at now, is you have to be able to say, okay, fine, the workflow that I want to build looks like this, which means I've got these atoms and now I want to connect them into, I don't know, molecules, right? Where you are going to go and send this out to you, and you're going to send this out to you, and then that means you can get away from this human copying and pasting, right? So this is the thing that we're trying to build up now, is this idea of all of these different application developers all flowing together in this kind of unified environment where the backbone powers it all under the covers.
And I know you've been really instrumental to the founding of, you mentioned FTC3, which is an open source standards initiative. So the industry collaborating around FTC3, of course, is a massive enabler. And that I guess that's the art of making this entirely possible in many regards.
I think that's absolutely right, Julia. I think, look, each application provider always thinks about designing the best application for their users to give them the best experience. But what's certainly true that if we can think about what the user's doing before they use that application, during and after, and create those touch points, those contextual linkages, it really powers and accelerates that user experience to a completely different level. And that is what FTC3 is going to do for you. Now, to Tim's point, for this to be possible, the messaging standard has to be there, and the message bus technology has to be there, this common infrastructure. And that's why OpenFin is very often referred to as the kind of iOS or Android for financial services, because we're putting that common message bus onto desktops. It's on over 200,000 desktops today, and we have a clear path to reaching 500,000 desktops in the short to medium term, which I think is extremely powerful.
And at the heart of everything, we talk about your involvement with FDC3, and then also the appetite to work with not only application providers but also with your clients as well. At the heart of this sits very much a conversation around collaboration. And I'm really keen to hear, what is it when you're talking to your clients, because everybody has an enormous amount on their plate right now, what are they at risk of overlooking? Tim, let me come to you first.
Oh, what is the risk of overlooking? That's a difficult one because it's such a wide space. I think there's a couple of things. So I think our we have a very wide range of clients, right? I think our fintechs who we have a lot of fintechs we have really good relationships with. The message to the fintech community is always, figure out where you sit into the broad workflow on the financial desktop. And instead of thinking of yourself as being, this single component, think of yourself as being, a bit with a pipe that sticks at one end and a pipe that sticks on the other. Because then what we can do is we can talk to the big banks, and we can say, look, if you really want to solve this problem, then we've got the tools to help you plug into here and plug into here, and then you can flow through and be part of that. And I think that's a really big part of it. And then from the bank's point of view, then of course what we have to help them understand is that this isn't, there are no like single boxed solutions, because I think it's tempting as a purchaser in a bank to say, okay, we're going to solve this problem, which is going to buy this and it's just going to work, right? But of course it's all too big and complicated now. They haven't been in that world for decades. It's not going to get any better now. And again, it's about saying, okay, fine, how are you going to, like, here are the different Lego blocks. How are you going to build this thing? And how can we help you build this complete solution, involving your own internal teams as well? Because chances are you're going to have to weave your internal teams workflows with these external solutions that you've brought in, and make that a completely seamless experience for your desktop owner, right? So this is I think this is the thing, and I don't think they're overlooking this, but I think this is still a conversation that we're having with both sides of that fence. Do you think that's fair, Adam?
I think that's absolutely right. It's about everybody understanding the role they're playing in the workflow. Of course, it's about external applications. It's also about your internal applications, and that experience needs to be unified, across the board. The fintech point you mentioned is really interesting, Tim, because of course they're providing much more specialised, perhaps narrower solutions than kind of incumbent providers, and they have an important role to play. I think so much about the world in financial services is starting to look like the consumer market, right? The consumer market of choice, right? The consumer market of best of breed, and putting together an experience that you really enjoy, whether it's a bit of Netflix one day and something from Sky Atlantic the next. I think that's really, really important. But for sure, I think the overriding message here has to be about accessibility to innovation. I think many people think this is going to require a very significant investment. It's going to take me years to do this. And that just couldn't be further from the truth. There are so many accessible solutions. You can get to innovation faster than you ever have been able to before. It's at a lower cost point, and you can get some amazing quick wins to move your organization forward. And I'd really encourage, whether you're a vendor, a bank, or a buy-side participant, to really think about that.
And there are a lot of innovation labs as well, aren't there? The finance companies are sponsoring those.
And that's right, absolutely, Tim, because we're very involved with a lot of the innovation labs, and we're also, obviously partly through the podcast, but other conversations we're having, is that while people are trying to prioritize what they need to do, so they're reflecting on their BCP and actually how that has performed, and then now thinking about, okay, how are we going to get through lockdown, which we've just talked about, and then how the road ahead is going to look, is many people are thinking, well, actually, is that very hard to do? But what you're saying actually is that you'll be surprised how easy it is to innovate. The key also is to use this time to reimagine as well. But let's come back to OpenFin for a second, because actually you've been very generously not talking about OpenFin. Thank you for not doing your features and benefits pitch. I'm very grateful for that. But actually, I do want to talk about OpenFin. So you mentioned about your scope and your scale and your coverage, but also talk to us about what the organisation and what you've learnt through lockdown and how you've managed through this period of change. Adam, let's come to you first.
So I think from a company perspective, we've always allowed working from home, and encouraged our team members to work from home and have that flexibility when they need it. But of course, this is an entirely different situation. This is, having an evenly distributed team has delivered, I think, a much more effective work from home experience across the board. And everybody is very comfortable with the level of productivity that's been produced. It's certainly not without some challenges. And I think, we talk a lot about diversity, and diversity means many different things. But for me, under COVID-19, it's been really interesting because looking at each team member's kind of home situation, you start to get an insight into their personal situation. So, do they have dedicated working space? Do they have access to outdoor space or gardens? Do they live with friends or family, or are they by themselves? And that is certainly, means that each person's work from home experience is very different. And as a company, we've been trying very hard to understand that. And we actually launched a company survey recently to understand everybody's work from home perspective and also their thoughts for what remote working could look like going forward as a company. One of the clear messages coming out of that survey is that some people, in fact, over half the team are saying that they're having a problem kind of unplugging after work. So we've been kind of brainstorming collectively across the company and thinking about what are the different mechanisms and techniques you can use to try and unplug to create that detachment. We're also encouraging people to take holiday and various other things like you normally would, because we think that's important for mental well-being. Interestingly, one of the other stats in the survey that come through around the challenges side was that 35% said that communication and collaboration was being hindered in some way. Now, we've certainly got all the great benefits of Zoom and technology at our disposal. So it's interesting to dig into that a little bit further. And actually, the underlying message was that they're missing overhearing conversations, picking up small kind of sound bites that actually helps with their learnings in an office environment and helps them build and grow, in addition to the very simple things we take for granted, like looking over somebody's shoulder, looking at somebody's screen. For Tim's team, perhaps it's checking a piece of code or whatever it may be, or us jumping into a meeting room and using a whiteboard in some way. Now, there are tools available to start to help you overcome these, and we've been looking at tools like Mural, which are kind of a dynamic kind of online whiteboard and so on. But there are certainly some things that we just can't quite overcome in this environment. On a more personal side for me, I usually travel extensively and work pretty long hours. That means that I'm not generally at home an awful lot, and particularly not in the evenings. And I was actually commenting to my wife last night, but I can't remember the last time we had dinner together as a family so consistently for a period. And that's certainly something that I'm going to take away. And I think it's made me value even more my personal circumstances. I'm lucky enough to be in a really fun household with great wife and two great children, and that's really helped throughout lockdown.
And it is interesting, you mentioned lots in there about sort of familial circumstances and also, mental health and fitness as well. So during lockdown, we're asking all the guests this question, which is there anything you've particularly turned to help you through this? I mean, is there a particular TV show you've been into, or have you found a new game, a new music?
So it's like Adam says, I'm spending a lot more time with my family, which is nice. But the thing that actually is keeping me going is I'm growing a complete herb garden on the windowsill of my office, and I now have the largest basil plant I've ever seen in my entire life. And I'm just counting the days until I can eat it, basically. So I'm not just counting the days until lockdown. I'm also counting the days until I'm going to eat this entire collection of plants. The Other thing is, me and the boys, because I've got three large, boisterous boys, have been watching all the Marvel movies from the beginning, and we've been experimenting with different orders, and we've got an order that we think is the best order. So we'll be publishing that later, and obviously that will, make it internet celebrities. No, it's hard. It's hard. One of the things I've noticed is that engineers, if you leave them to their own devices, all become nocturnal. And this has been, this has been good when they've been dealing with the New York teams, but it has been hard when they've been dealing, with people like me who are morning people. So that's also been interesting, and you talk about looking after yourself under lockdown. Exercise is so important, and I just hadn't realized actually how much I was missing the gym until about a month ago, and now I run outside voluntarily, and I hate running. I hate running. I'm not one of those people who believes in finding yourself outside. I know where I am. Thanks very much. That's what Google Maps is for.
So I think Tim makes a really interesting point about exercise, and I think you need to keep exercise fun as much as you possibly can. And one of the things we've done, I don't know if anybody recalls this from their school days, but it's certainly the last time I've done this, but it's something called the beep test. And the beep test is a running test. It's a horrific test that essentially measures your fitness level. It basically requires you to shuttle run between a 20 meter distance, and you have to get to the other end before the beep goes, and then basically the period between the beeps starts to decrease. So as the run goes on, you have to run faster and faster and faster, and that marks your fitness level. Now, I can tell you, it's great fun to do as a family, but it is less fun seeing your 15-year-old run for far longer than you can.
Love it.
Yeah, I'm the second slowest in our household, and the only reason I'm the second slowest is because my 9-year-old is like half the height of me, and so I've got leg speed. Other than that, they're all
well,
faster,
of course, everyone's now
fitter than
going
me
to start doing the beep
Yeah,
test,
I know,
which
that's
is
good.
which is wonderful. Let's come back to it's a weird to do a segue from a beep test to regulation, but I am going to give it a go. So I am asking everybody actually when it comes down to thinking. We talk about the road ahead, and we talked a little bit earlier about things you have to be at risk of overlooking. Of course, let's not forget we still live in a highly regulated world, and I wondered if there's a particular piece of regulation that you are paying attention to, you're concerned that people may not be paying sufficient attention to. Talk to us about one particular piece of regulation. Adam, coming to you first.
Super interesting question. Very different question, Julia. So all credit to you. So OpenFin is not a regulated entity, and given both Tim and I have come from regulated entities, we really like to embrace that some days. A more serious note, all of our clients are clearly, many of our clients are regulated entities, but for me, it's probably actually the senior management regime. So my journey around senior management regime probably started prior to that, which was in the more traditional CF1 or CF3 type role. So when I was working for the Nomura Group and was deciding to move the business out to Internet, I was lucky enough to be appointed CEO for Europe, but I was only 34 years of age. And I was running really material businesses inside the Nomura Group. But of course, CEO credentials for a regulated entity maybe there wasn't as much depth of experience that you could immediately point to. What was super interesting about this is that Nomura Group invested significantly in kind of corporate governance training, additional regulatory compliance training, corporate governance training, and the like. And clearly, I'd always had that training in a regulated entity, but this was with a lens of, as a leader of a regulated entity, these are all the things you must think about. You must control. And by the way, as a designated CF1, CF3, you are accountable. Now, under SMR, that's become even more personal in terms of the accountability level for each individual. But just think about it. That training for me, I was kind of you have to embrace it, because it's about managing the risk in your firm, prudent financial and capital management, creating good outcomes for your clients, operating in a responsible manner, thinking about the culture of your firm and how you want your employees to behave and what you want them to represent, and underpinning that, just good underlying systems and controls, and all kind of, the MIS, the management information systems, to, for you to have really good visibility that your entity that you're controlling and responsible for is operating as intended, and that you're seeing the warning signs of things going wrong or going well, or whatever it may be, and you can mitigate any risk. Now, who wouldn't want that for a business? That just sounds like, to me, that is a great way to run any company. And I take so many of those learnings and still apply them today in my thinking here at OpenFin.
So I can't help but think then, in terms of, you talk about systems controls, you talked about management information, the MIS that sits within that. Is Tim, within the senior manager regime, what's the relationship then with technology?
Oh, the senior manager regime and technology are quite complicated because you have accountability for everything that happens, but of course it's often opaque as a senior manager. So what has to happen is you have to show that you've got all of these things in place where the technology is being accounted for, right? And of course it's an interesting problem because technologists generally don't enjoy any kind of paperwork at all and will push back massively, but you still have to have those controls in place. And in the art of the SMR compliance is putting enough controls that can show what's going through your systems, tests, documentation, Jira tickets, but not so much that your programmers all go into dirty protest because they can't actually do any code without filling in 3 forms in triplicate and submitting a form to the central planning committee, right? And it's an interesting balance. It can be made to happen. It can be done. It requires a bit of a mindset change sometimes, but generally it's not any different to the mindset change you find for any kind of, well-structured large coding organization, right? Code reviews, people being honest and making sure they actually, have done testing the things rather than just saying, oh, yeah, it's tested, worked on my machine, right? And that's the balance that you have to strike. It's doable, though. It's doable. It is just a bit of a mindset change.
Of course, what strikes me is that at the heart of, again, it comes back to the point we were making earlier about, oversight requires, a single moment of truth, that exactly what's going on and what's not going on in order to manage that. And of course, interoperability comes together on that, and the ability to have all your applications and all your systems beautifully aligned and combined so that you have confidence. It is about having confidence in what you're seeing. So as we go into really the last few minutes of the show, I would love to hear your thoughts on the road ahead, and what are you particularly thinking about as you look at the road ahead? And Tim, let's come back to you straight away with that. What's on your mind at the moment?
Sure. I mean, what's coming back to me is, getting back into the office, what that looks like 2 months, 6 months, a year from now, how much it's changed, how much it will change forever, and adapting to the new normality, which is at some point we're all going to be back, but I don't think we're all going to be back forever. So I think it's going to be, I think everybody's going to be working from home a little bit now. This is the new normality, and I think this is something we're all comfortable with, and building these incredible tools that we think that we can build, that are going to continue to evolve this world, continue to evolve this workflow oriented, much more dislocated from a human perspective world, and just putting as many bits and pieces as we can in place so that people can use them.
Wonderful. And then Adam, take us up to a slightly higher plane in terms of the conversations you're having with your clients, looking at OpenFin's future strategy without giving away any trade secrets. But what are you particularly thinking about at the moment?
I think this is really about an acceleration and a movement forward of many of the trends that we've been discussing for some time. So there is very clear trend to people modernizing their technology stacks, from upgrading from legacy technologies to web technology and embracing the benefits of cloud. Web technology is cheaper to build on, it's faster to build on. The talent pool is becoming bigger because that's what they teach kids at school and university these days. That's really important. And the other is, of course, everybody's had digital projects underway for some time. Some people have been in the planning phases, some people are in the process of implementing, others are very, very advanced. But I think, as we've talked about today, the need for digital workspaces to really power your employees, no matter where they're working, is a really important topic. And I think we're seeing acceleration of focus on digital strategies. And I think it's really important to stress again that the barriers to entry have never been lower. We would encourage new fintechs to get in contact. if you have a new application that you're looking to offer to the marketplace, for the larger organizations, if you're looking at legacy technology, you want to move to web technology, OpenFin has a good solution for you. And for everybody thinking about remote working, digital workspaces, powering users, super accessible, the solutions exist, please get in touch.
Fantastic. Listen, it's been a wonderful conversation. If you think about everything we've covered, literally from regulation right the way through to the realities of COVID, some about your history, what you're focused on, but what's been even more important is we've been talking about what your customers are thinking about, what the fintechs are thinking about, and we're all going through change at the moment. So I just want to take a moment just to remind listeners how to find you, which is openfin.co is the website. And Tim Dinsdale, Adam Toms, thank you so much for joining us today.
Enjoyable as always, Julia. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
I've been Julia Streets. To everybody, thank you for listening.
This episode of Streets Talks 2 was produced by me, Kieran Yates, on behalf of Streets Consulting Limited. Streets Consulting is a business development, marketing, communications consultancy that's focused on helping fintechs from the smallest startup companies to some of the world's largest global organizations. Everybody's trying to innovate and everybody's trying to grow. You can find this episode on streetsconsulting.com and using the hashtag StreetsTalksTo. We can be found on LinkedIn and on Twitter at StreetsConsult. Thanks for listening.